Good morning and welcome to our homestead. We're going to talk about 6 steps that you need to take to ensure big success when hatching chicks. Our flock is getting a little bit older and we need to start replacing them with some new chicks. And we do it in an incubator, and I'll show you every step that we do. The reason we use an incubator is because I don't have broody breeds. We've only ever found 2 hens that have been broody, a Rhode Island Red and one Easter egger. And since I used the Hen Gear rollaway nesting boxes, it didn't work out for them very well at all, because as soon as they got up, the eggs were gone. So let's get to those 6 tips that are going to help you be incredibly successful when hatching your own chickens. Behind me I've got my incubator and also a tote full of eggs, and I'll talk about that more in a second. But tip number 1 is to only take eggs from your best hens. If you need to isolate your hens to figure out which ones are the healthiest, of course, and then also which ones are the best layers, then do that. Because having your best layers is important, because that trait will transfer down into your new chicks. And to go along with that, you need to pick your best rooster. If you have multiple roosters in your flock, you need to separate which one you think is the best and put him with those great hens. Again, those traits are going to transfer down to your chicks, and those chicks will be strong and good for your next flock. Okay, tip number 2 is to take from your best hens and rooster the absolute best eggs that you can get from them. You want eggs that are not misshapen in any way. You don't want ones that are bumpy on the outside or kind of oblong or anything like that. You want them to be absolutely clean. Here's some examples of those eggs. You can see this one over here is tiny. It's not good for hatching at all. And then this one over here is kind of oblong. It's a little stumpy. It's got some bumps in it. You just don't want to try to hatch these eggs. You're not going to have much success with them. Even this one right here is a little long. It's really kind of squished and it doesn't have much of an end. It's actually very hard to tell on this football-shaped egg which side the air sac is on. You can candle it to find out, but there are much better eggs than this to use. And you want their color to be normal and good for that breed of chicken. Any eggs that are too small or ones that are actually too large and look like they're double yolkers will not incubate well, and you are going to have a really low rate with eggs like that. Any eggs that have any cracks in them, and you can candle them before you start incubating them, you want to get rid of those cracked eggs. Anything with any small chip out of it or anything like that, get rid of those. And like I said, make sure they are clean, because you do not want any contamination at all in your incubator. And that's where those rollout nesting boxes really come in handy. If you want to see our video on that, click on this video at the top of the screen. For many people who are seasoned, you're going to know number 3. But for you beginners, make sure that you do not wash your eggs. There's a special coating that's on the outside of the egg that comes from the hen, and if you wash that off, it will completely spoil the egg. Keep in mind also that you do not want to put the eggs in a refrigerator. You need to keep them out, and I'll talk about storage a little more in a few minutes. Tip number 4, always collect more eggs than you want to hatch chickens, because not every egg is going to hatch out. There's a way to tell if they're fertilized by candling them, and you need to do that ahead of time. But even if they are fertilized, they are not going to all hatch. But if you stick to these tips that I'm talking about today, your hatch rate is guaranteed to be much higher than if you don't. Let's get our eggs out of this container here, and I will show you some really important things you need to know when storing your eggs for hatching. Number 1, you need to store them with the pointed end of the egg down. See how the round end is on the bottom, it's sticking up? This needs to be pointed down in storage. Now, it is okay to store them on their side if you want to, but the main thing we're doing here is trying not to damage the air sac that is inside each egg. Handle them with as much care as you possibly can, and you can store these eggs for hatching from between 7 to 10 days. After that, they start losing viability a little bit. Some will still hatch, but the best way to get the most out of these eggs is to not go over that 10-day period before you put them in the incubator. All right, let's talk about temperature and humidity for storing these eggs before you hatch them. Humidity levels can be about 60%, and we'll talk about specific humidity levels, which is very important, coming up here in a few seconds. But the temperature you should store them at in your house is room temperature. That's completely fine. Like I said, don't put them in the refrigerator, but don't let them get too hot or the development process is going to start, and you don't want that while you're just storing up these eggs to get ready for hatching. The thing that I'm going to discuss later is called dry hatching and why that's important if you live in the southern United States or south of here. When we are storing our eggs, we put them in a container like this, and that will help to hold in humidity if you need that. In our house right now, we've got a humidity of about 62%, and that's with our air conditioning on. And you need to have a really good thermometer and hygrometer to let you know what the humidity percentage is, because it is important. Now when storing, I said you could store up to 60%. You can see ours is about 62, and there's really nothing I can do about that in our house. We have the air conditioning on, which is taking a lot of the humidity out of the air, but this percentage right here is maybe a little high, but I think we're still going to be all right. If your humidity is too low, what you can do is in your tote, you can put a small bowl of water, and that will help raise the humidity when you put the top over this. So you can see that our eggs sitting in here are kind of on their side. What I like to do is rotate it. So every day I'm going to come and just rotate it around and leave it on an angle like this, and that's going to help with that air sacking. Okay, let's talk about tip number 5. Test your incubator. I don't care if you've had your incubator for 2 years, 10 years, 1 year, or it's brand new. You need to test it to make sure that it's working properly. And you need to test it for several hours to make sure it's holding the proper temperature that you want and all of the settings are working according to how they're supposed to work. This one's working totally fine. We've got 24% humidity currently in there and 101 degrees. And our cycle is set for 21 days. And a lot of people will say to me, Eric, why aren't you using a hen to hatch your eggs? Well, I touched on that briefly before. The breeds that I have aren't broody. So it's really hard to find a broody hen to even put any eggs under. And since I have the rollaway nesting boxes, I'd have to provide another type of nesting box for her. That would be fine, but at the time that we need our chicks to be hatched, I just don't have any hens to put them under. Okay, the 6th tip, and I briefly touched on this earlier, and that is candle your eggs to look to see which ones are fertilized. Now you can tell by looking at this picture which one is fertilized and which one isn't. I'll look for a lot of veining within it, and that means there is some development that's already started, and that egg will be good for hatching. Okay, let's talk about dry hatching for a minute. This is something I learned from a local chicken expert up at the feed store. He's been raising chickens since he was about 5 years old in 4-H, and he's in his mid-60s now. He said down here the humidity is just too high. Your chickens will drown as soon as they start pipping out of the egg. Now traditional hatching in an incubator means you've got a humidity level of between 40 and 50%, raising it to 60% on day 18. But with dry hatching, we're going to go all the way down to 15% to 30% and then raise it to 60% on day 18. And that's because there's so much humidity in the air that the egg is pulling it in. And you do not want too much moisture in this egg. And if you want to get really technical about it, the egg should lose 13% of its water weight up to day 18. And if it has more water in that, when that chick goes to get through that air sac and start pipping out, then that chick is going to drown. And that exact thing happened to us last year when we were raising our chicks. We had put so much water into our incubator that when they started to pip out, and we had a fairly good rate of development, when they started to pip out, unfortunately, every single one of them drowned. And that's why I'm presenting the dry hatching method to you today for those of you who are in the South. You're going to have much more success with it. We're going to get these eggs in the incubator, and the girls brought me a few more from outside. Come on, girls. You got me some more? Okay, great. They're all laying on their side. These are fresh eggs, and like I said before, laying on the side is totally fine. We are going to use the best ones here. So I see 3 that I'm probably going to use. They are good size, good shape. And I'm going to take the top off this. It's a great temperature in here. We're just going to lean it up like that. And we are going to date these today. And we're going to place them down in there like that, with the big part facing up. Okay? Addie, grab the last 2 on that side. Don't forget to stick around for part 2 of this video with our chicks hatching out, which will be, of course, in 21 to 30 days, give or take. Happy hatching, and I hope these tips help you to have a really great hatch rate with your chicks. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comment section below. Now go click on this video right here, which talks about exactly when to move your chicks from your brooder to your coop. Have a beautiful, blessed day. See you next time. Bye.